So welcome back to another one of my analysis for the week. Apologies for being missing in action lately. I've had a lot of stuff going on personally, um, and moved overseas for a little bit. Had some mental health stuff to deal with and things like that. But I did take some time off trading, and now I'm just starting to get back into it. So hopefully I'll be able to produce some more content for you guys over the next few weeks. You can see here the orange list on the side is a list of pairs that I have analysed over the weekend. Market opens in about 12 hours-ish. It's currently Sunday evening here in Australia. It's 10 to 10, so market opens in about 12 hours. And I just want to run through a few of those setups with you now, and hopefully that you guys get something out of it. So the first one that I analysed was Nzdjpy. Now what I'll do is I'm going to leave, actually I'm going to leave this here, and I'll just sort of explain, how this is all marked up. So for starters, the red and the black are key levels. So how I find them is I go onto the monthly and just find sort of major levels of support and resistance and things like that. So I'll leave those on the chart just because I've sort of already found them. And I will get rid of the rest, and I will walk you through how we did this analysis. Cool. So the first thing, guys, obviously we start on the higher time frames, and we just look for certain patterns and things like that have already completed, and also any sort of key levels that have been hit. So you can see that this key level here, obviously a major level of support and resistance in the past, and it's also the -27 target has been fulfilled. So if we go on to the weekly time frame and we use the last pattern, so in this instance it was this pattern here, like that. So if we use this and draw the fib from this high to this low here, we can see here that this was also the -27 and also tapped the -61.8. So both Fibonacci targets have been hit, which would suggest that at some stage price is going to reverse. Obviously, just depending on how much it is going to reverse is obviously the thing we need to find out. So from here, we can assume that obviously price is going to go up in the general direction, but if we zoom out, we can see that we are in a long-term downtrend. So the first thing we want to find is where that downtrend is, and see if we can find any targets that we can reach before that, and then wait for a breakout to take longer-term trades. So obviously start at the highest point. I just grab my trend like this, start from the top and just run it down and try to tap as many candles as I possibly can to validate that trend. So you can see here that if we start here, we have one, almost two, we have a tap here which is perfectly on a key level as well, we have a third one here. So we can basically say the price still has a little bit of room to move to the upside before a potential breakout, and then we can look to take further longs, but for the meantime they're just short-term buys until we can actually break this trend line. So we'll leave this here for now and just delete that fib and just use that trend line as a shorter term take profit, and as I said, then wait for breakout. So drawing a trend line in this is going to be a little bit messy, so I'll take it down to the daily, and we can see here it's much easier to be able to draw a trend. So once again, if we start from somewhere at the bottom, tap as many candles as we can and do something like that, we can see here that obviously we have a lot of price action here, we have a lot of price action here, and ultimately respected with this wick as well. So we'll leave this here for now. And the first thing that I want to notice as well, guys, is we can see an M pattern forming. So for those of you who don't know, generally M patterns signal a buy entry. So generally if something looks like an M, it's going to go up, and if it looks like a W, it's going to go down afterwards. So we can see here that there is an M forming. Now what I want to do is I want to see, we're obviously heading in an upwards direction, and we've also had a very strong bearish candle from this level here. So how I want to draw my fib is I want to take it from the very lows of this leg to the highs, like so, and I want to look for areas that we can potentially be retracing to. So the first thing that sticks out for me is obviously the 61.8. It's always the 61.8 just due to the fact that that is a very big obviously number in Fibonacci retracements, and simply all I do is I draw a line there and I'll mark that 72.049, and I'll do that in red, and I'll just simply write daily 61. Cool. Now if you want, guys, you can also do your take profits based on this as well. Now we can see here that this lines up essentially right near the trend line, which is good, which gives us a pretty safe area to be able to take profits. So I'm just going to mark that somewhere about here, and I can delete this fib. Now the one thing I'll notice as well, guys, that if this 61.8 ultimately was to be respected, it would literally be a perfect M pattern, something like this, before we can potentially write that up to the take profit. So how I'm going to work out an entry, guys, is I'm going to go down onto the 4 hour. Now you'll also see here that the trend line is a little bit funny. It's a little bit out of whack. So when this eventually zooms out, I'll be able to show you what I mean. We can see here that price has broken this trend. So ultimately what we want to do is we want to fix that up just a tiny little bit. So about there. As I said, guys, wicks are okay to go to wick down below the trend line, but closing below the trend line is something that I don't like to do. Now you can sort of see here that the chances of this landing around about this this type of area are a lot more higher than if the trend line was up here. Obviously it would have to have a really steep sort of dip, but with this one you can see we can sort of have nice flowy price action until we get to around about this area. Now another thing that you guys know that I like to do is I like to use the previous leg. For those of you who have watched my previous videos, and if you haven't, I suggest you go and do so, but I like to use the previous leg to measure a take profit in terms of a -27. So what I mean by that is this is the leg here that we're looking at. This is the previous one. Okay, so this is the leg we're measuring. This is the previous one. So I'll go from the tops here, I'll go right down to the bottom. I can see that the -27 is almost right near the daily 61.8. Okay, so I definitely want to mark that, and in this instance I can just use a box. Now what I've also done, guys, is I've put grid lines. You can maybe see those faint grid lines on my chart, which is something you can do in the settings, and basically what it does is, depending on how far you sort of zoom in, obviously the numbers become a lot more round, so they can go in 50 pips, 100 pips, you know, things like that. So what I like to do to find entries is use those numbers, because we do know that price does like to respect those type of numbers. So what I'll basically do is I can see here that these two lines are right in between the 72 and the 72.20. So I'm going to be 72 and 72.20, and I'm going to make that spread all the way across so we can find something in here to help us find an entry. Now another tool that I have been using lately is the daily highs and lows. Now I only actually use this on the 4 hour. I don't actually use it on the daily. These are always the wrong color. So I'll show you how I use these to find entries. So these lines are a bit thick, but it's okay. So basically what I do, guys, is I go back in time and find a daily high or low within this zone that I can look for entries. Now, as you can see here, they're all sort of pretty, you know, right at the top or right at the bottom. There's none really sort of in the middle. So what I'll do is I'm just going to go with the one as close in the middle as I can, which is this one here. And as you can see, that almost exactly lines up with our daily 61.8 as well. So that's where I'm going to be looking to take an entry. So I can get rid of these and I can simply put this here, 72.037. like this. And then what I can do, guys, is I can go down and look at these grid lines again. Now what I do is I go put it to that grid line, and then I do about 10 to, depending on the pair, depending on how volatile and stuff that it is, I'll go 10 to 15 or 5 to 10 pips below that. So we can see here that if I leave it on that grid line, it's 23 pips. So what I'll do is I'll go to say 35, something like that. So even if price does wick down, we're hitting the 71.8, so it's got a fair few sort of levels to get through. And then I will run that back to the tops up here. Beautiful. So we can see potential 188 pip take profit. If you did want to be a little bit more conservative, you can just run it back to the tops here. So even still a minimum of almost 1 to 4 risk reward, but if we do run it right back to the tops, we're a 1 to 5. So now I can get rid of all this mess and just simply leave that as the chart. So that's the analysis for that, guys. So I'll go to the daily just to explain everything again. So you have the key levels. This was also a negative 27 target that it's rejected. Still in an overall weekly downtrend, but we are heading our way back up towards that. So in the meantime, we can take shorter term longs to run it up to at least that trend line. Obviously, we have a daily trend line forming here, matches up with the 61.8, which is this level, forming an M pattern and also a negative 27 level to take along there as well. So that's a currency pair that I'm looking at this week, guys. Obviously, there is quite a few in here as well, but it's going to take me sort of a long time to get through all of that. But you can sort of see here that what I've basically done, guys, is the same type of thing for every sort of one. So even this one, for example, New Zealand dollar, very similar. So you do this leg, so that's a pattern completion, and you can see here that it's tapped both targets. No worries, and in this case it's actually broken out of the weekly trend line. So we can go to the daily, we can draw the daily trend line up from here and say, cool, it's broken. It's retested here, but I'm looking here to take a long, because on the daily, I think I drew this fib from here, I believe. Yeah, so if we go right from where this bullish sort of movement started, and we can draw that fib, this line's up here, which gives us a nice zone. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do that, which gives us a nice zone here. And we can see here, guys, that if we come down to this, we're also retouching, you know, exactly both of these trend lines, and then we can look to take the movement up. And then possibly another tap down to this trend line, which will give us another M pattern or something like that. So it's very simple, guys. To do a top-down analysis, just start on the weekly, get an overall direction for the market. So obviously, you know, see where things are going. I have mentioned, as I said in a couple of videos before, I don't really like using the monthly because the candles don't really tell me a whole lot. I will use the monthly to get key levels, but that's essentially it. I don't really use it for anything else just because the candles don't really tell me too much. So I generally always start my analysis on the weekly, find the overall trend, find if targets have been hit. So as I said, guys, take this measurement, find out if the target's been hit, and then we can look for reversals. And then we can basically look for smaller patterns and things like that. So this could basically set us up for basically a year-long trade, you know, if we manage it quite well. If we go back to the start of last year, which is somewhere around here, you can see that if we caught a trade early enough, we could have been in a short, you know, the whole year and managed that for the whole year. Obviously, I'm not a position trader, but this is a slower pair, and we're still looking at 600 or 700 pips. Also, another thing I've just seen here, guys, is if that trend in fact does respect like that, we have an inverse head and shoulders right there. Okay, so yeah, as I said, guys, weekly overall to determine overall direction and overall long-term targets, then to the daily to find out current direction and shorter-term targets that line up. So guys, I hope you've got something out of this video. As I said, I apologize for not posting for so long, but If you do have any feedback, please leave a comment below. Like and subscribe if you do like the channel. And if you do like the content, I'm also starting to put out content on my Instagram page, which is FX Trader Josh. And I'll provide as much content on there for you as I can. So hope you enjoy the week, guys. Have a great week, and I will speak to you soon.